I want you to talk about a sales strategy I have not heard anybody else talk about. So I'm all over LinkedIn. I follow all the RevOps people. Nobody else is talking about this, at least in the same way that you are. Now I'm going to butcher the name. Channel specificity for sales reps. What's it called?
Trademark, baby. Channel development. It makes way more sense than people.
I was about to say, this just sounds like it's common sense.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I'm
Welcome back to another episode of the only place for unscripted, unfiltered conversations about all things digital agency ownership, life, and of course, agency sales. This is the Best Damn Agency Podcast. I am your host. For these 50 minutes, it's going to be 50 because Joey has a sales call. JJ Russell and Joey, partner in crime, as always, here hanging out. And what's different this week? We're boozing it up on the show again, man. We're back.
Yes, we are. I am bringing out a crowd favorite for those who are in the mastermind.
Oh, the Adictivo tequila. Nice.
Yeah, so I went to the store. I had a buddy. So my wife was out of town a couple weekends ago with your wife, obviously.
Yes.
And I had a buddy come over and smoke cigars. And so I went out and bought it's just so funny. I went out to go get Adictivo, and they had a little one, and then I looked over, and they had a big one. And I was like, I want that. So I spent way too much on that. And then I went into the cigar humidor, and they had my favorite, go-to everyday smoker. Not every day. It's not an everyday when it's $14 a stick, but it's the Olivas. I grabbed the entire box, and it was empty by it was missing 2 sticks. So I went to the register, and she goes, you're going to have to pay for the box. And I was like, I'm about to walk out of here with $300 worth of cigars. Can I have your $5 shitty box? She goes, I didn't know how many those were. Yeah, of course you can have the box. It's great. I'm like, all right, thanks, lady.
So remember when we were in the Dominican?
I was spending $500 with you, and you won't give me a $5 box? Come on.
We were in the Dominican, and one of those hustlers on the beach, they have their shack set up right down the beach from the resort. He beckoned me in. He sucked me into his game, man. He literally lit a cigar, stuck it in my mouth, let me smoke it, and then he was like...
That's what I thought I heard you say at first. I was like, wow, dude. I knew you were trying to make a joke, but it was so far.
It would have been awkward because my wife was 100 feet away in this. Yeah.
Listen, what happens in the DR?
Stays there, yeah, for sure. Before you told me you were drinking on the show, I poured up a strong Americano. So
nice.
I am
Don't waste it.
Basically Four Locoing on this. I'm going to crush the caffeine, and then I'm going to hit the alcohol.
As you should.
Yeah, 100%.
As you should. Happy Friday, everyone.
Yeah, happy Friday to you guys. I hope you're pouring up a glass with us. All right, so I want to jump into some real discussion. We'll keep the banter going, but I got a topic that I want to jam on for a second. So it's
Lovely.
like a 2-part question.
Okay.
They both have to do with relationships, and it's all around this idea of in 2023, as a successful entrepreneur, business owner, you're typing to a prospect right now while you're on the show. I appreciate that, dude. You're doing deals while you're on the podcast.
I'm trying to close this. I'm trying to get my
slinging,
assistant to write.
You're
to write
slinging deals, bro.
I'm listening to your question.
All right, 2023 relationships are weird. So my first question is, how do you choose your friends? We'll start there.
Wow, just a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
How do I choose them?
Yeah,
well,
your
depends.
time is valuable.
There's categories, right? And there's levels of friendships. So for me, I have friends who I reap spiritual reward from, who challenge me in my belief system and my faith. I have people who are my really good business friends who challenge me in business. I have my pickleball friends who I wake up at the butt crack of dawn. By that I mean 4:30 to go play at 5:30.
Ooh.
I'm gonna go do that tomorrow. I do it every Monday and Thursday now, sometimes Saturday.
Pretty sweet.
I pick them because they're competitive and they're fun. And there's 8 of us that usually play every 2 or 3 times a week. But I would say the general theme in all of those friends is I like to hang out with people who challenge me in some capacity of life. The best friends can challenge me in a lot of areas, but I would say that's tends to be what I look for. I don't like to have friends who are. I just don't like I don't have friends who I just like shoot the shit with and just like do absolutely nothing. Like we do shoot the shit, but there has to be some depth to the relationship. I just don't have time to fuck around these days. I just don't.
Yeah. I typically choose people who are DTF.
Down to frolic.
Down to have fun. I feel like that's a big one for me. Like if you're somebody who I can call up on a whim and you'll jump into whatever crazy adventure I'm about to embark on, then there's a high likelihood that person and I are going to
Bro, with kids, that's so hard to find those, though. Where do you find them? Like, is there a store where I can go pick some up, or like...
All right, here is a unashamed plug for a group that our business is 0% affiliated with, but you asked. Getting back involved with F3 is the single best thing that I've done in a long time.
You found some new friends since you joined?
Yeah, there's like... So F3, it's a group that was started by some military guys in North Carolina, and they realized that they needed faith, which is purpose bigger than themselves, fellowship, and fitness. And they had that when they were in the Marines or military, whatever they were in, and they got back and they were missing it. And so they got together at a football field, rain or shine, sleet or snow, and did hard-ass workouts together at 5:30 in the morning. So now it's all over the place. And so
it's kind of like pickleball.
It's not just make some new... It's a lot like pickleball. But it's not just like, did you make a few new friends? It's like there's hundreds of guys in Louisville who get up 5 days a week at 5:30 and go bust their ass.
Oh,
and those are the kinds of a lot of the workout locations are 3 days a week, but there's 20 locations in Louisville. So if you want to get 5 workouts a week, you can find 5 a week. So, but all those guys are the type of people that like adventure, that like to push themselves. So there's dudes every week who are like, hey, you want to come do a 24-hour ruck event with me? You want to come do a Spartan beast with me? You want to come do an orienteering trip in the woods with me? So
the real question, though, is what's your nickname or your call sign?
Come on, man. You got to put me on the spot like that.
Well, I've been an F3 before. I know what mine is. You've told me yours before, I think. I just don't remember what it is.
What's yours?
Mine's Ricky Bobby.
I like that.
Because when they asked me to introduce myself, it was when I had just moved to Knoxville. And I was like, and they're like, what brought you here? And I was like, part of it's work. Most of it's just following my smoking hot wife here. And they're like, Ricky Bobby. It was instant
I like
name.
that. I like that. So mine is Smurfette.
That's cool.
It's kind of gay.
A little bit, which is cool because it's Pride Month.
Well, the
Maybe
names are supposed to be... The names are supposed to be a little bit like self-degrading, humiliating.
Yes. Sure.
And they asked me where I went to college. I said Presbyterian College, and some guy said the Blue Hose. Another guy said, what the hell's a Blue Hoe? And I said a little Smurf prostitute, and then they named me Smurfette. So that is how that happened.
I like it. I like it a lot.
All right, my follow-up question to how do you pick your friends is maybe a little bit more serious. I know that you and Rachel are super intentional with the way that you parent Gabe, your son, and he is you're a really good dad, and you get he is a priority to both you guys.
Yeah.
Are there core tenets or pillars upon which you would say that foundation of parenting is built? Like, what's the frame or lens through which you think through what successful raising of your son looks like in this day and age?
That's a great question. Let's see. I don't believe in legacy defined as what a lot of the world would call legacy, right? Like
a trust fund.
Making a mark on your world with your business and your ambitions and like the Elon Musks will leave a legacy because of the businesses he built or whatever. I think that we tend to throw that word legacy around, and all it really means is we want to get rich, and and to be quite honest, no one will remember your name. Like I couldn't even tell you my great grandfather's name. Actually, I can't even tell you my great grandfather's name. But like you forget people. And but I do believe in legacy in the sense that you do leave something behind, but it's with a very, very small group of people. And it's typically those who you are called to shepherd and steward. And really, when you actually like look at it through that lens, there's only a handful of people who probably fall into that category, you know? And so now it does expand from there, but like you won't get, like legacy, I tend to think of like you get the attribution for, right? And so your, like whatever impact I've had on JJ Russell's life, like that will not, your kids will not attribute that to me having an impact on you. They look at you, right? And so that's where I'm like, legacy's kind of bullshit in that sense of like, yes, I will have an impact on people, but realistically, the only people that actually will attribute it back to me are usually my wife, my kids, my direct friendships, the people who work for me for long periods of time, which is a very small group of people. So it kind of stems from that. You know, that's one pillar.
If there's more to share, go ahead. But I do think one thing to point out here is I think that a lot of people, and we actually pointed this out maybe in the last episode, myself included, are way too concerned with what people think. And you've got this superpower that can become like a hindrance that you're that you just don't really care what most people think. But I think it's like you care about what the core nucleus thinks. Like I think you're aware of who those people are that actually matter in your circle, and you care very much about them, and everybody else, it's like
I don't care at all.
What they think doesn't really matter. All right, so are there more pillars, core tenets of your parenting?
I mean, I think there's certainly the aspect of like from a biblical perspective, and I come from, or I subscribe to my religious beliefs or that of the Christian faith. Based on the Bible, and I think that a lot of the Bible talks a lot about rearing children, and they are arrows that you shoot out right into the world, and so there is some of that there. I think there's even if there was no other direction from the Bible outside of you are called to be a steward of the gifts that you have in your life, I think that we would all say that our kids are gifts, and if that's the case, then we should be a good steward of those kids.
True.
The last part is more or less, if you don't teach them, someone else will.
That's good.
It's either going to be you or it's going to be the school system. It's going to be you. It's going to be their television. It's going to be you. It's going to be their peers. It's going to be you. It's going to be a high school football coach. Like whatever it might be, like you have to be the most influential teacher, instructor, mentor, individual in their life that influences who they are. So it's kind of a combination of all that.
No, that's great, man. I think alongside of what you just said, the more is caught than taught idea that we've both seen and illustrated for us.
Oh yeah,
like you learn a lot more from watching people do things and live their lives than you do like what they say or what the ideologies are that they subscribe to. I mean, we see that in business world, right? So it's like you have all the gurus out there on LinkedIn that are telling you what you should do, but it's getting in the room with people who have actually done it and can speak from their experience, or you watch them live that out in real time. Like that's where I feel like a lot of the real growth comes from. And so for my kids, I think a challenge that I face, and somewhere I try to live this out, but it's hard. It's harder than you'd think it is like I can tell them all of the things that I want them to do, but am I demonstrating those things for them? Are they seeing it in real time? And so, like if one of the biggest things for us is that they love on and build relationships with people, because at the end of the day, like people and relationships are all that matter. Are we doing that? Like, are they seeing us care for our neighbors and step in? Are they seeing us engage with the greater community? Are they seeing us have humility? Are they seeing us go out of our way to help somebody else? And I think that there's a lot of times that we struggle to do that. But that's a big one for me too, just lead by example.
Well, I think another one too, looking at how they realizing that after 18 years, probably maximum, they will be on their own, making their own decisions, and eventually they will end up with somebody. And I think that if you want your son to seek out the greatest potential spouse, then your son's mother needs to reflect what they should look for in a woman. And as my job as the husband or the father is to show him how to be worthy of someone like that. And I think that's a huge conviction that most should possess, is like, you will directly impact who they end up with. And the worst thing possible for you would be if you heard that your daughter married some douchebag scumbag of a human being because they had daddy issues, or they didn't respect you.
True.
Or whatever. They didn't get attention from their dad. And so therefore they went to the first place that would give them attention, which is some fuckboy who makes them all these promises. And so that's just more 100%. Or less a kick in the pants.
I'll wrap with this on this topic, and then we'll make the turn into sales. I think the last one for me is, I want my kids to see me take big risk, take significant challenges on, and excel, like be excellent, and not settle. I think that there's just a lot of, and we've talked about this on the show as it pertains to business, there's a lot of mediocrity that's being celebrated, and I want them to see me like lean into the talents that I have and maximize those, and do hard things, and then face that adversity head on, so that they know in some ways that they absorb that through osmosis. Hey, my dad did hard things, and this is what it looks like to walk through hard things. So, that'd be the last one I would add. All right. Speaking of growth in community, how you pick your friends, being the summation of people that you surround yourself with. Before we talk sales strategies, tell people about how that lives in the Best Damn Agency Mastermind.
Cool. Yeah, BDAM, as they call it. When we set out to build a mastermind, it was to create a community of men, specifically agency CEOs, doing between 1 and 20 million in revenue, that had a desire, a passion, a vision for more multiplication in their business. How do they grow as a leader? How do they grow their business? How do they take the money from that business and grow their wealth? How do they take principles and character from other men and develop who they are and multiply their relationship with their spouses and with their kids? And so when we did that, we set out with the goal of building a mastermind that wasn't based on money and monetary value. I think that we can both make a lot more money doing other things. But that's what we did when we created Best Damn Agency Mastermind. Was we wanted to create a community where multiplication was the main goal. And who you are as a man, who you are as an agency CEO, who you are as a leader is incredibly important to us, for those of those who join the group. So if you are an agency CEO, you are male, sorry, women, and you want more for your life, for your business, for who you are as a man, and for your relationships, then I would encourage you to check it out. If you go to bestdamnmastermind.com, I would encourage you to just watch the video. Listen to the men speak about their experience. Listen to who they've become, what they've accomplished, what's different about their business since being in it. And I'd consider, if that seems to align with what you want for your life, for you to apply. And if you apply, you'll talk to JJ. If you talk to JJ and you pass the sniff test, you come talk to me. If you talk to me, then we send you through one more step of vetting, and then welcome. Your life will probably change.
Great pitch for the mastermind, Joey. We did not have any technical difficulties. But to those of you listening, those of you watching, I've officially transitioned from
male to
coffee
female.
to whiskey. No.
Yes, that too.
Coffee to whiskey. And I got a cool bottle. So this is actually one that we grabbed at the mastermind trip to Nashville. We went to the Greenbrier Distillery and picked up a bottle of Bell Mead. Limited edition. They stopped making this. This is actually, this one I think they still make, or you can get it out at some whiskey or liquor stores. This is their sour mash, and so it's got like this
that place was
really
so cool.
I know. I loved
their history was awesome.
It's like the great grandsons found their great grandfather's busted down distillery and bought it back. It's cool.
Yeah, really cool. They came across the distillery not knowing that it was tied to their family, and they looked into it. They're like, oh, that sounds like my last name. And they looked at their genealogy, and they're like, oh, shit, like this guy started this who happens to be my great-grandfather. I want to do this now. It's super cool.
And now they run a kick-ass distillery. You can do anything you set your mind to. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk sales.
Transition.
Turns out, I'm going to ignore that. Turns out you're still really damn good at sales.
It tends to be a gifting that I've been given, yes.
So I was wondering, right? Like it was a question, unanswered question that I had. Did Joey still have what it takes, or is he just a washed up guru who's teaching what he used to know? You know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of guys in the industry who are just telling you about what they did 6 or 7 years ago. You know, are you one of those guys? Then you step back into the cockpit and you started selling again for us. It's been it's been interesting. Some would say explosive. Some would say dangerous. Some would say potentially hazardous to the long-term well-being of our company and ability to scale alongside of what you're selling.
Sure.
Talk about your experience.
Just blanket statement. I'm good at it.
What?
I mean, listen, I had this conversation. I was actually on a podcast today recording with podcast with a bunch of like sales and rev ops listeners.
Cool.
And we talked about like what are the most important traits of salespeople. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I think that it's just the sales rep industry has just turned upside down, and the Pareto principle has never been more true, in my opinion, that 20% of the reps out there are basically worth all the attention, and 80% should be sent down to sales rep hell. Yeah, sorry, that was aggressive. But this is really interesting because it's challenging to teach this, but it's not challenging to create the environment to grow in this. So the top 3 skills or characteristics, I think, and I've thought about this so much that I'm like so convinced that this is the case, is ambition and drive. You have to want it. You have to have the desire to get up and get kicked in the face at times just so you can go get that win. You have to have a vision for yourself, and that has to translate to the effort you put in. Intuition. This one's tough because you can't teach intuition very well. You can point it out and help people become more aware of it, and people get there through repetition and 10,000 reps and that whole thing. But intuition, I think having the ability to almost have like otherworldly sixth sense on like who you're talking to and how they're feeling, where they're moving towards, like what's the general gut feeling there. And then the third is discernment. You know, I talk a lot about like the best sales process is not telling you what to do every step of the way, that you have to do this, then this, then this, then this perfectly to the T. It's highways, lanes, and guardrails is the way I talk about it. I like to look at a sales process as, or a sales rep's journey as a highway. And on that highway, I put guardrails. That's my process. That's my framework. Don't go outside the guardrails, but pick your speed, pick your lane, right? Know when to speed up, know when to switch lanes, know when to slow down, so on and so forth. That's discernment. Knowing what lane to pick, what speed to go, when to press in, when to pull back, when to double down, when to challenge, when to match tonation, when to match like emotions in the room, when to kind of take charge and kind of be like the alpha in the room versus when it's time to like just sit back and listen. Like all of that is like, if you can have those 3 things, you will be top 1% sales. I think I have that. And I think a lot of that's gifted to me. And it's a gift that I've, like some people are naturally good at like ball sports, right? Like you, me are probably both in that category. We could probably pick up a ball of any sport, whether it's pickleball or it's football or it's, throwing the disc, in track and field, and within no time be relatively competent. But you can be competent at something as a gift, but you have to sharpen that gift. And so I think that there are people who are innately more intuitive. There are people who are innately more discerning. There are people who are innately more ambitious, but you still have to sharpen that. And so for me, I think that I have all 3 of those things. It makes me a top 1% seller. Yeah. And so that's not
great.
the answer people want to hear. Answer. It's just the answer that is true. So when you are looking for hiring sales reps, I would ask myself, where are they in their level of ambition? Where are they in their level of like just intuitively being able to read the room? Where are they in their level of discernment of how to handle situations? How do they think? And that's maybe the 4th one is, are they not a rebel, but are they a free thinker? Like, can they think for themselves? And I think that lends to having good discernment and intuition.
It's really good. I love the framework. last week,
I think too
and
much,
I said
dude.
we would. That's all right. I love that you think.
You guys should
are
read
an
Outwitting
IP
the Devil.
machine.
I'm an
Who wrote
IP
that?
machine because I am a thinker. I force myself to not take things at face value.
Yeah.
It's also why I can't be a liberal.
Got him. All right. So last week you mentioned the 3 kind of tested, tried and true components of sales that will never go away. You talked about mindset of the sales team, transparency and accountability, and then being in tune with your market, knowing what they want.
Yep.
I want to sit on that first one, so we won't just jump off into those. I want to actually parlay
Okay.
what you were just talking about with the top 1% of salespeople into the mindset thing. So the mindset of the sales team, you mentioned like needing a culture that is motivated a certain way, kind of set a certain way, and then you talked about sales reps who need that type of free thinking, but what was the word that you used? Ambition, that are ambitious.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Is that something that you build, like that a sales leader instills into a sales team, or is that you're just the aggregate? You are the sum of the parts. Like you have to hire those people consistently over and over again. Can
Yeah.
you train that, or do you have to hire for it?
I think that you're a cultivator, right? Like you're not a creator, but you're a cultivator. And so
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle. I do believe that you should probably fire, 50 to 80% of your sales team today if you had a substantial size sales team. Like inevitably there's 20% you should invest your time in. I was talking about this on the podcast I was on today, which is like at the end of the day, your job as a sales leader, a CEO who has salespeople, is to look at your sales op, realize that 20% is driving 80% of the results. If your results are subpar, you should cut off the 80%. But then your job is to now take the 20% that's remaining, which is now the 100%, and continue to add to that to where now the new 80% is equivalent to the old 20%, if that makes sense. Right? So that's your job.
Can I challenge that real quick?
Yep.
I don't want to. Okay, so I posted this a few weeks ago. The Jack Walsh bottom 10%, A, B, and C players. You're probably familiar, but he would fire the bottom 10% of I think all of his teams, but especially his sales teams. So interested to get your take. So you said fire the initial 80%. He would say that 80%, those are your B players, or that middle like 70%. I think he would say are your B players, and they're actually the people upon which your company is built, like the backs of those people your company's built upon, and then you have the A players that are like the superstars. So if you fire that 80%, you're firing a lot of B players from the jump.
I don't think
or
they're
no?
B players. If you're looking
Okay.
at Pareto principle, like legitimately, B players cannot make up. So Pareto principle says 20% drives 80% of the results. Okay. If that's the case, then there's only 20% of the results left over, which means that there is 80% of the people only driving 20% of the results remaining, which means I don't think a B player does that. I think the B is in that 20% that does drive results, right?
Interesting.
So I think there's probably there's another 80-20. It's why they call it the 95-5, right? Because 80-20 and then 80-20 of 80-20 is 95-5. There is the A players that are the top 5% of your 100%, and then the B players are probably the next 15, and then it's your C, D, E, and Fs. I guess not E.
Yeah.
It's not a real thing. But C, D, and Fs make up that 80% you should let go of. So I agree with Mr. Walsh's approach. I think that you should keep your B players who are your consistent. They hit or get close to quota, and then your A players are like your ballers.
Cool. Okay, so cultivator, not a creator. This is something that you're just trying to, over time, build into your
mindset.
sales team.
Right.
Okay, mindset.
I can't
Yes.
make someone ambitious, but I can cultivate their ambition. I have a great example talking to me right now on a podcast. I think that you were naturally, you had a level of ambition, of excellence you wanted to do, and you still have a lot of that, but it's on steroids, right? And so I think that my job when you first joined me, 3 years ago? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
3 years in October.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I think my job was to cultivate that in you. And either you're going to step up to it or you weren't. But I think that was my job. And so help you think different, remove barriers. But it was always inherently there. I don't think that I just made you ambitious all of a sudden. So I think that's the job of a sales leader, a CEO, whoever's over top their people, is to just like find the people who have it innately in them and just pull it out of them.
Yeah, it's really good. Cool. Mindset. All right, so let's talk about the other two kind of core tenets of sales, evergreen factors in like a successful sales operation. So you mentioned transparency and accountability.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about what it is. How do you create transparency and accountability inside of a sales operation?
I think there's a number of ways. One is, in sports, it's ball don't lie. Numbers don't lie at the end of the day. And when I say numbers, there's a couple different numbers. There's outcome numbers, which is like revenue driven, revenue influenced, profitability. And then there's the leading indicator numbers or some of like the other lag indicators that kind of lend to like the ultimate outcomes. And so I think that there has to be a level of transparency and accountability to that, where I think most people would agree with that. I think most people would say, yeah, accountability, management, metrics, KPIs, yes. Where people really mess up is two places. One, they try to automate as much reporting as possible, and it makes the numbers lose any sort of weight, right? Because the sales reps get told what their numbers are at a certain time frame. They don't go find those numbers themselves. They're not aware of them themselves, at least not all of them. And so that's a challenge. And then the second part, so the first is you automate that, right? The second part is you don't know what to do with the numbers when you get them. And so that's where a lot of people fall short is they might have a level of transparency, but they don't know what to do with that number. But usually people are automating it. They've got their dashboards in HubSpot or Salesforce or Outreach.io or whatever tool they're using that tells them, oh yeah, they're getting this conversion rate and their win rate's this and whatever. What we have always instilled and has always been the number one tool for sales management forever, will always be, is having a daily shutdown scorecard that even though I could automate all the numbers that come in on a daily basis, I force every rep that I've ever hired or every rep that any of my clients ever hire to do a daily shutdown scorecard, which means that they have to go get their numbers. Those numbers can be automated to them, but they have to then transfer those numbers from where they get it to my software that tells me in the daily shutdown scorecard where they landed that day. It's not for me. It is to some degree, but not for me first. It's for the sales rep to have personal accountability to themselves, because nobody wants to put in a goose egg. Nobody wants to put in subpar numbers for a very long time. And so if they are aware of their numbers on a daily basis, then they feel a certain type of way, which is what's more important than organizational accountability and transparency is personal accountability and transparency. That's where people mess up.
Talk me through not knowing what to do with the numbers. Give me an example where you've seen that.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us would agree that sales is somewhat of a numbers game, right? Like you can almost reverse engineer nearly any number if you have enough data. Unfortunately, most people look at the front end inputs and they look at the back end outcomes. And there's all this stuff in the middle that are potentially levers to pull on. A good example, right? We have a new-ish client that I've been doing some consulting for. I've been looking at their numbers. And if you look at face value at their revenue generated from their outbound sales team, it's basically a goose egg, non-existent. Okay. And then you look at their front end numbers of dials, emails, etc., and you could look at their numbers and say they're not putting in enough numbers, right? So you might just tell them, well, you should just increase your call volume and your email volume. They have a relatively small team. I think in 6 months they had made 3,900 dials and 12,000 emails, most of which are automated emails. And so like an idiot would probably be like, oh, we just need to increase our volume because we did get some conversions, but we only saw 11 conversions across both platforms. And so, well, if I back into my numbers and I've got a 5% conversion rate, if I want one deal to come out the bottom, then I need to have at least 20 deals. I need to double my volume. That's what they would say.
Yep.
That is true. You could do that, and that would get a result, that potentially is along the lines of getting one deal out of that effort. Now, one deal in 6 months is not ideal. But if you take it a layer deeper from like the first leading indicators of this is the volume to, okay, well, what happened when they did those 3,900 dials or those 12,000 emails? What was, if you're going down the dials, how many dials did they make? What was their dial to connect ratio? Of their connections, what was the disposition of those connections? So when I say disposition, I mean right person, yes. Right person, no. Wrong person, referral. Wrong person, no. And if you get you understand the split there. So if I have 3,900 dials and I have 79 conversations, but 42 of those conversations were wrong person, I have a data problem or I have a buyer persona problem. That tells me a story. I need to work on who I'm targeting because I'm targeting the wrong person 42% of the time. Now, you can go a layer deeper and say, okay, I have a 2% connection rate, really low. Industry standard should be 4 minimum. 8 is kind of like benchmark, what people aim for. I'm aiming for 20, 25%. We talked about Ryan Reisert, Fund Ready Leads. He can help get there.
Yep.
We actually will be able to help you get there now soon. But you look at that 2% conversion rate, which is astronomically low, and you're like, oh, we're not even getting to someone to answer the phone, right? So we're spending a substantial amount of time on a ringing phone or on voicemails. They spent more time on voicemail. I looked it up, the stat. They spent more time on voicemail than they spent talking to human beings.
Dude,
Literally.
that's so bad.
3 times as much time on voicemail minutes than they spent on conversations with somebody. Not even the right somebody, just somebody. All that to say, emails are the same way.
So there's the ability to make inferences off of like the conversion metric data. That's a big one. I think the other place that I've seen this, and I want you to talk to it, it was another question that I had for you later in the podcast, but it fits in here great, is the ability to make the hard decisions. So we've already talked about the Pareto principle, 80-20ing your sales team, cutting the people that aren't cutting it. But I think a lot of founders, owners, CEOs, they look at their sales metrics and they're like, well, so-and-so's underperforming. Well, I'll give them another month, right? Like they're trying their best, right? Or they've got deals in the pipeline. And that same conversation goes month to month to month to month, 0 results. They're not hitting quota over and over and over again, and they won't make the hard decision of laying that person off. Why is that the case?
I think some of it's people don't know what they don't know. And so here's what tends to happen is I'll liken it to like a startup. So if you're like an angel investor, seed investor, whatever, it's like you have this charismatic founder who comes to you and wants to raise capital. And you say, okay, cool, I want to invest money. 3 months go by and like, yeah, we didn't have the months we wanted to, but we figured a few things out, like, but we're running out of cash. Like, how about you invest a little bit more? And you invest another $100,000 or $500,000. And then they're like, we're getting closer. We're so close. Like, I can just feel it. They're like, okay, but we're running out of cash. Okay, I'll inject a little bit more money. And then you get so far in that you're like, I've almost spent so much money that if I cut ties now, I guarantee a 0% return.
Wow.
Or what if they are 2 months from figuring it out? What if my money does turn into something? What if this guy's just been a slow start and he's going to become my like A-player stallion, in time? And a lot of that comes from ignorance of not knowing what you don't know, but it also comes from human psychology of I don't want to put money into something and just cut my loss on it. And I want to reframe people who are afraid to do that. I always talk about like it's not a loss if you learn. And so you have to be willing to be introspective about why that didn't go well so that when you hire the next person and make the next investment in the next jockey or the next entrepreneur who's asking for seed money, that you now have data from your losses that help inform and mitigate risk on your future investments. And so it comes from ignorance. It comes from the like sunk cost of like, but I've already put so much into this sales rep and what if like they're a month away from just like figuring out the message and they just figure out how to flow and they just figure out how to generate more leads because they crack the code on copy. And unfortunately, a lot of that comes from ignorance, but the other part comes from you just don't have a process for vetting talent and for keeping talent accountable to what matters. And so I have a very simple framework. 30, 60, 90, right? So 30-day, 60-day, 90-day assessment. In 30 days, it's very simple. The metric for success is, are they doing volume of activities that consistently to the point where they are gaining muscle memory on what I'm asking for them to do. I'm not even asking for outcomes yet. I'm just literally asking, are you putting in the effort I'm asking you to? And have you started to develop product market training, understanding? Like, do you understand the product that we sell to the market? If they pass that, give them the next 30 days. At the 60-day point, it's different. It shifts from product market and activities to, are they hitting scorecard metrics, right? So are they booking a certain amount of meetings? Are they pushing a certain amount of leads into pipeline? Are they, if revenue is able to be closed in that time period, are they influencing revenue yet? Are they getting close? And then 90 days, if they pass 60, 90 days is basically the same exact thing, but are they able to do this without any reminding? We call that like autonomous, I forgot what I call it. I gave a name for it at one point. It was like autonomous success or autonomous scorecard metrics, something like that. But basically it's do you need me to remind you that this is what I'm asking of you? Or are you on your own doing it? And after 90 days, then they have proven themselves in all three categories. And then you have a good sales rep more than likely, and you review them on a quarterly basis.
That's good, man. I think it's I love that you got the benchmark. So now it's take the data that you've got, right? So transparency, accountability, make the hard decisions, but now you've got a 30, 60, 90-day framework through which you can make these decisions. It's great. All right. For those of you who have stuck around, and I appreciate you, those of you that listen to the full podcast, we had a lot of downloads for our rebirth of the pod episode. So 4 weeks ago for the relaunch, a lot of people listening. I appreciate you guys. I want you to talk about, late in the podcast, a strategy that I have not heard, a sales strategy I have not heard anybody else talk about. So I'm all over LinkedIn. I follow all the RevOps people. I follow everybody. Nobody else is talking about this, at least in the same way that you are. And I'm going to butcher the name, so you guys have to tell me what you call it again. But it's basically the channel specificity for sales reps. What's it called?
Trademark, baby. Channel development.
Channel development.
Well, so to go like sales rep historical progression, you've got we used to go, it was just the one sales guy who kind of like beat the streets, knocked on doors, had his briefcase, full cycle sales guy. Then it became more about like inside and outside sales, right? And then it became more about inside sales and account executives. And then it became SDR and account executive. That's where we kind of exist today. Now, I'd say there's a layer deeper of the SDR, and it's the entire reason why that model is imploding is the tech-enabled SDR AE model, right? And so it's we blow up an SDR's ability to do a volume of outreach with technology. It doesn't produce any better results, but we spend more money on tech, and that's why they're less profitable. But the challenge is sales development rep is all about how do we work all of our channels? How do sales reps dial, email, LinkedIn, direct mail, whatever, to get opportunities and serve them up for our account executives? That model, I think, is still doable and it's viable if you can get them at the right price, but I think that it's more challenging to get profitable. The model that I have been playing with myself and the model that I think is the model of the future is more channel development. And so instead of sales development where you do all sales, all channels, you instead have more channel specialists, if you will. So you might have, and we all know this, if you've seen a sales rep who is better on the phone and is a shitty copywriter, or they're amazing at copy and research and they understand social selling on LinkedIn, but they're terrible at the phone, right? Well, we tend to just like say, hey, here are sequences. Go make the dials, make the emails, make the LinkedIn happen. And they spend 2/3 of the 1/3 on this, 1/3 on this, 1/3 on this. Well, if they're better at email and their conversions come on email and they're terrible at phone, then why are we having them spend time on the phone? Right? Same thing. There are some people who crush the phone but suck at email, yet they're spending 1/3 of their time finding email addresses, pulling it from ZoomInfo, which costs money to you. And they're dropping into their sequence, and they're not getting any conversions except for like some shitty ones and some bounce rates, right? So what I believe is the future is there's two levels to this. One is channel development. Find people who are excellent at phone, make them do phone, and they only do phone. Find people who are excellent copywriters and they don't love the phone, have them do email. And find people who are great at social and have them work LinkedIn, social selling, etc. And what you'll find is you will have someone who's really good at a channel spending 2-3 times as much time on the channel. So you can have one cold caller, one email person, and one social person, or even one cold caller and one email and social person, outproducing 5, 6, 7 SDRs because they're in their zone of what they're best at, and they have more time allotted to it. And so I think we will start seeing a lot more of like phone teams, email teams, social teams. And the best part with technology today is you can have an email person who is sending email for 15 people, right? Because of technology today, it allows them to alternate inboxes and send for different people because they don't know who's actually hitting enter or writing the copy. They just see whoever the email address is from. So I think that's it. Now, the layer deeper is if you can get amazingly good at list segmentation. And you can not just have people who are really good at the phone, really good at email, really good at social, but you can hand them a list of people who are far more likely, statistically speaking, to answer the phone. So not only are they spending more time on the phone, not only are they spending more time in the channel they're good at, but they're spending more time in the channel they're good at on the phone with people who are likely to answer it, statistically speaking, more than historically, where you give them just a list of everybody. And then those who are unlikely to answer the phone, you give to the email team, which means, statistically speaking, they're more likely to commit an email. And so you have people who are better copywriters who can spend more time in email sending to people who are more likely to convert on email and not on phone. It makes way more sense than people.
I was about to say, this just sounds like it's common sense. I would imagine, though, so there's people who have not figured out what channels are viable for them yet, right? So they don't have list segmentation. They don't have a ton of historical data. They probably don't have a big sales team that they can segment this way.
Yeah.
How do you get to the point where you can start to specify what salespeople are doing and what they're not? Well,
outside of work with Apex revenue. But let's assuming Apex doesn't exist in this scenario. One, I think that you need to go to, like, when you're hiring sales reps, don't hire greenies who've never done anything. I think just the days of hiring the just out of college SDR, I just don't believe in anymore. Just period. I think if you have if you're okay like losing money on like development because you just need a massive pipeline of talent, that's one thing, but most of us do not. Go find somebody who's currently selling and ask them, hey, based on your past year, 2 years experience, where do you find yourself the most comfortable and where do you find yourself getting the best results? Are you a phone person, an email person, whatever?
Yep.
And you'll find, so it's funny, there's a guy on LinkedIn who, I think he works for Gong, which I hate Gong, but he works for Gong. His name's JC. He's a really good copywriter, but he'll be the first to admit that he's actually gets most of his conversions from the phone. I think 80% of his deals closed that were phone generated last year. And so I would go to him and say, where were your conversions at? And he'd probably say 80% phone. I say, great. How do you feel if I just took everything off your plate and said, I want you to focus on the phone and I'm going to give you better data? And then go find those people. That's how I would do it. Yeah. And then honestly, if I was doing cold email, I would try to go find someone who's done really good like sales copy for email. You don't need, it's not 1-to-1 on email. Like you can have, again, 1 to 10. You can have one person sending for 10 email addresses. And so go find the best copywriter you can possibly find who understands sales, cold outreach with email, and just go pay that person what they're worth. And they're going to outproduce any first year SDR who's now being taught how to do phone, email, and social at the same time.
And then get visibility on your metrics and make inferences based on those metrics.
Precisely.
Having listened to this podcast. All right, you got to go close another deal in 3 minutes. So with those 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I want the simplest answer possible. during 2022, you have been storing up a war chest of cash, getting ready to invest when the time is right. Is the time right?
Well, the business started to implode early 23, late 22. So I spent money buying out a business partner. I spent money, with an unprofitable business. So I have my bucketing strategy of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 buckets. I won't go into it. We could talk about it another time. I felt like it was best served me and my family if I continued to invest my cash in bucket 3, which is my business. And so I spent a lot of money on business. I spent some money on some real estate deals. And then now I'm in the process. I kind of hinted at it, but there's a vendor who we've used who I'm now buying a portion of their business to be part of our business. And so that's where I'm investing my cash right now. If you would asked me early 22 when I built the strategy, my goal was to basically dump a shit ton of money into real estate as the market started to tank. And unfortunately, how things go, things did not go how I planned. And so I just pivoted.
That's right, man. You can pivot with the best. You got that pivot foot down, baby. I love it.
That's right.
Great to be pouring up a glass again with you, finally. I'm glad you're over the health kick. This has been fun. We'll do it again next week, I think, assuming that you're not jumping back into 75 hard for the third time. To those of you listening, if you didn't have something to drink this week, bring it next week. Hang out with us. It's Friday. Sip something good. Yeah. As always, thank you for giving us your time and attention. We value it. It is valuable. If you're watching on YouTube, check us out on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're just listening, check us out on YouTube. We've got a couple dozen subscribers. We just relaunched the channel, Best Damn Agency on YouTube. Subscribe, like, comment, do all the things that make us feel warm and fuzzy. And as always, we will see you here, same time, same place, next week for another episode of the Best Damn Agency podcast. Later.
Whoa! Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah,